What's up guys, it's the Hockey Radar tracking drafts and prospects, and in today's video I wanted to look at some of the recent prospect swaps in the NHL and give a quick review and my opinion on the deals. This list is not exclusive and I'm only looking at the last couple of seasons, but let me know if I miss any trades in the comments down below and I'll put it into part 2. If you're new to the channel, make sure to check out the rest of my page for all the prospect content, including a 2026 draft series where I look at all the top picks for next year's draft. Starting with the most recent of the bunch, on July 8th, 2025, the Edmonton Oilers sent 19-year-old 32nd overall in 2024 Sam O'Reilly to the Tampa Bay Lightning in exchange for 21-year-old 31st overall in 2022 Isaac Howard. Howard put up 26 goals, 26 assists for 52 points in 37 games this past season for Michigan State of the NCAA, and was quickly becoming one of the most hyped-up winger prospects going into this past offseason. After some contract disputes, and the Lightning understandably unable to guarantee some top NHL minutes, Howard refused to sign his entry-level contract and forced the Lightning to move on from him. After testing the market and getting underwhelming offers due to the lack of leverage for Tampa, they opted to ship the best college player in 2024-25 to the Edmonton Oilers. Howard would go on to sign his ELC and is projected to get some vital top 6 opportunities this year with McDavid or Draisaitl, as the Oilers are looking for a punch of youth in their lineup. With all the talent around him, Howard has all the chance in the world to put up a solid rookie season. I don't foresee much Calder hype considering who he's up against, but I could see a solid 40 to 45 point season for Howard, especially if he can stick on those top lines with some of the best players in the world. Going the other way is two-way centerman for the London Knights, Sam O'Reilly. The Oilers originally traded a future 2025 first-rounder to be able to select O'Reilly in the 2024 draft after a 56-point OHL winning season with the London Knights. This past year, he would put up 71 points and was a plus 56. On top of that, he had 22 points in 17 playoff games, as the Knights would go on to win back-to-back OHL championships and go on to win the Memorial Cup. O'Reilly is signed to his entry-level contract, but will return to the Knights and be one of their top forwards for this upcoming season, and he projects to be a solid third-line checking center at the NHL level. Overall, the Oilers undoubtedly got the better player, and so I'll give them an A- on this trade. They took advantage of a sticky situation in Tampa and turned a third-line forward into a top 6 forward 1-for-1. Although losing value, the Lightning still did pretty well in this trade when you consider how public the situation became and how little leverage they had. At the end of the day, they got value for a player who did not want to be there. Losing Howard sucks, especially for a team who has very few prospects, but for a team with a solid top 6 already, maybe having a third-line center on the way is better for them in the long term, and after developing two-way forwards like Cirelli and Hagel, maybe they can do the same with O'Reilly in a few years and boost his projection to a second-line forward. With all things considered, I'll give them a B+ on this trade. On to trade number 2. On August 28, 2024, the Winnipeg Jets shipped off 20-year-old 14th overall in 2022 Rutger McGroarty to the Pittsburgh Penguins for 19-year-old Brayden Yager, who was the 14th overall pick the very next year. McGroarty was fresh off a 52-point NCAA season as a sophomore for the University of Michigan, a season which included a gold medal at the World Juniors. After a great season and quickly becoming one of the top prospects around the league, seemingly out of nowhere, McGroarty told the Jets he would not be signing with them that offseason and essentially forced them to trade him, as he disagreed on what the Jets had planned for his development. Similar with the Lightning, the Jets' hand was forced, and they had to test the market knowing they would probably lose value due to the lack of leverage in the trade. McGroarty would go to the Penguins, and although he would start in the NHL, he quickly found himself in the minors, which was where the Jets would have wanted him to play anyways. Now, starting the season injured, he will look to stick with the Pens all year as they are desperate for some youth to help out their lineup. Going the other way was Brayden Yager, who had put up 78 points in his draft season and went 14th overall to the Penguins. He would follow that up with a 95-point season, and most recently had 82 points in 54 games split between the Warriors and the Hurricanes this past season. He projects to be a middle 6 forward who will get some time in the AHL for the Manitoba Moose, and I could see him getting a call-up here and there and maybe a full-time spot next season. Overall, because of the extra year of development at the time, the Penguins got the better player in McGroarty, but again, similar to the Lightning, the Jets got great value when you consider the tough position that they were in. At the time, the grades would differ, but giving a grade today looking back at the deal, I will give the Pens a B+, as they took advantage of the Jets' situation and got a great winger who can help lead the next generation in Pittsburgh, but who didn't quite take the next step that many expected of him, especially with the ice demands that he was asking of the Jets. On the other side, I will give the Jets a B, as they did well considering the cards they were dealt, and Yager still looks like a solid prospect who not necessarily is caught up to McGroarty in terms of development, but the gap is much smaller than when it was at the time of the trade, which makes the two grades fairly close. Trade number 3, mid-season on January 8, 2024, Katagoche, the 19-year-old former 5th overall pick in 2022, was shipped to the Anaheim Ducks in exchange for 21-year-old 6th overall in 2020, Jamie Drysdale, and a second-round pick. Drysdale had NHL experience at the time, so not really a prospect, but still a decent U23 player with potential, so I will include this trade in the video. At the time, Cutter had 23 points in 17 games for Boston College and finished with 65 in 41, plus 12 points in 7 games at the World Juniors. According to Flyers GM Danny Briere, he said that Gauthier once claimed that he was built to be a Flyer, but a few months later had told him he no longer wanted to play for Philadelphia. Credit to the Flyers, they kept this under wraps better than the previous 2 trades, and therefore Briere was still able to get pretty good value at the time because their situation was not public yet, therefore they still had their leverage. Gauthier would go on to have a very solid rookie season with the Ducks the following year, with 20 goals and 44 points in 82 games, with much of that coming in the second half of the season, showing that he was developing as the season went on. There was a lot of hype around Gauthier now, with many thinking he can be a first-line winger capable of 30-plus goals a season for a promising Ducks squad. On the flip side, the Flyers received Jamie Drysdale and a 2025 second-round pick, which turned into Jack Murtaugh, a promising prospect out of the National Development Team and now with Boston University. Compared to Gauthier's near-instant success with Anaheim, Drysdale's experience is not as fortunate, as he struggled with 5 points in 24 games to close up the 2024 season at a -18, and this past season with only 20 points in 70 games and a -32, as someone who is supposed to have decent offensive numbers and who once put up 32 points in 81 games for a very bad 2021-2022 Ducks team. Overall, the Ducks at the time got the better player, and looking back, even with Murtaugh being considered, the Ducks still come out on top with an A grade as they took advantage of yet another player who didn't want to play for his draft team, and they have turned him into a very promising winger with a fairly high ceiling. The Flyers at the time did the best they could considering the situation, and the value they got back was decent, as again, Drysdale was once a 32-point defenseman as a 19 to 20-year-old and had 5 points in 10 games at the time of the trade. Unfortunately, he has yet to find his footing in the Flyers organization, and even with that second rounder becoming a decent prospect, I will give the Flyers a C+ looking back today. All 3 players are still young and have time to turn things around, but as of now, it's fair to say the Ducks came out well on top of this trade. Up next, on August 24th, 2024, the Predators sent top goalie prospect and former 11th overall pick in 2020, Yaroslav Askarov, in exchange for a package which main pieces were 19-year-old former 32nd overall pick David Edstrom and Vegas' 2025 first rounder, which the Predators turned into Riker Lee at 26th overall. Askarov looked like the future of the Predators' crease up until they re-signed current starter Juuse Saros to a massive deal that would make Askarov a backup at best, as he was told to report to the AHL. He followed that up with a trade request and found himself dealt to the San Jose Sharks. Overall, San Jose came out with the best player at the time, and although Askarov spent the season in the AHL anyway, he still looks like the goalie of the future on a very promising Sharks squad, so I will give them an A for this trade. They had drafted several top forwards and promising defense but lacked a future goalie to backstop them, and so they filled a massive positional need, and with an abundance of prospects and first rounders, they were able to make those pieces expendable to bring in Askarov. The Predators got decent value back, as they had little leverage with the trade request and with Saros locked up long term. Edstrom and Lee project to be decent NHLers, however they lost the obvious best player in this deal, and although he has still yet to prove that, it is hard to give them a grade higher than a B- on this deal. Especially looking at where the Preds are now, in need of a rebuild/retool, they could have gotten a ransom for Saros on an expiring deal and had Askarov on the way for their future. However, they bought in with their core and now they are in for a troubling next couple of years. Last trade of the video, on July 1st, 2025, the Blues sent 22-year-old former 17th overall in 2021 Zach Bolduc in exchange for 22-year-old former 31st overall in 2022 Logan Mailloux. Same with the Drysdale trade, Bolduc had a year of NHL experience, but still young enough that I would consider him a prospect for the purpose of this particular video. Montreal got the best player right now, as Bolduc was fresh off a 36-point in 72-game rookie season, and if all goes well, maybe he could push his way into their top 6, and good on them as Kent Hughes had a plethora of young defensemen, especially after the Dobson trade, which made Mailloux expendable for them. It's hard to grade as the deal has just happened earlier this offseason, but I'll give the Canadiens an A for this deal as Bolduc looked great last season, and I think the Blues will regret letting him go, as they should know firsthand what it's like parting ways with a young player after pocketing Holloway and Broberg last year. On the other hand, the Blues do have lots of forwards who are all relatively young, and so they too could make their piece of this trade expendable and address a positional need, bringing in a 6'3" right-shot D-man who put up 47 points in the AHL 2 years ago, as those types of players are hard to come by. For their efforts, I'll give them a B+, since they gave up the better player right now for an unproven defenseman, at least at the NHL level, but Mailloux looks to be a solid NHL D-man, and they have the young forwards in their core already that they could make Bolduc available to make this happen. That's it for this video. It feels like these types of trades are becoming more and more common, with young prospects forcing their way out of an organization and threatening to stay unsigned and leave for nothing. It makes for very interesting deals, as the values of players of this age are hard to establish, as many of them are unproven and still have potential, so there's high risk in making these moves. Let me know what you guys think. If you like this video, I will do a part 2, maybe of some older trades like Adam Fox or maybe even Matthew Tkachuk. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and stay tuned for tons more prospect content to come.